I'm your host, Erick. For this episode, I am joined by Shelley Nicole, American singer, songwriter, musician, composer, actor, poet, healer, and frontperson and founder of the band blaKbüshe. And a lead with artists like Rosetta Tharpe, Nina Simone, Betty Davis, LaBelle, Joan Armatrading, and Michelle Ninicello, Shelley and blaKbüshe are equal parts rock, soul, blues, jazz, and funk. Her songs and stage presence that I've seen captivate the heart and soul. Shelley has collaborated with a diverse range of artists, including award-winning guitarist, composer, and producer Vernon Reid of the band Living Colour. Reid produced and performed on blaKbüshe's 2018 release, I Am American. Thank you to episode 99's Brad Walren for connecting us. I look forward to our conversation, learning more about Shelley and how she's carved out her lane as a dynamic and outspoken artist and performer. Hey, Shelley, and welcome. How are you?
I'm so good. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh my gosh, I'm definitely looking forward to this conversation. When I discovered you, I was like, who is this artist? I love the painting behind you. What is that?
It's me. So there's this, I'm going to lean to the side. There's this amazing artist out of Canada. I believe he's in Alberta, named Komi Olaf. He's Nigerian. You know, it's so funny. He's one of those people that I don't exactly remember how I found him, but it was like an Instagram find. Because I used to do some work for Art Basel magazine. I think I found him. And at the time, I was looking for somebody to do cover art for the I Am American album. And if you've seen the cover, you know this is not it. You know, I have Native blood in my family, and we're Cherokee. That's me. And Cherokee women, they don't wear headdresses, they wear bands. So I have my band on. We got the African side. I got a little head wrap. Shouldn't say little, but I have a head wrap going on. The hawk is my totem, my animal totem. And then underneath here, we have the cotton, because, we were picking it. But, just a part of the whole, of our story. I have moons going all around just to, signify womanhood and our moon cycle. I really love this piece. I love it a lot. But I was like, I don't know if I wanted it to be my album cover at the end of the day, but I love the piece. There's an artist, oh gosh, Billy Paul, who sang a song called Me and Mrs. Jones, but he has an album where he had the three faces.
Thank you for that. Yeah, because I noticed it right away. Also, Thank you for sharing, inviting us into the process of, as an artist or as a musician, singer, part of the work and all of the decisions that go into that. So thank you for that too. And Me and Mrs. Jones, and this is, when I was a kid, I used to hear that song and I just heard Me and Mrs. Jones. So I would be saying it however way I was saying it as a small child. Thankfully, probably my parents are like, just don't react because he doesn't know what he's singing. So it wasn't until I became an adult and I was like, aha, that's what that song is about.
Right, exactly. I know. So many songs we knew nothing about. I think about as a kid when I was 9, I asked my mom if I could go see Prince and Rick James. And of course, my mother was like, oh, hell no. But I didn't know. At the time, it was just it was fun. It was, you know what I mean? Not thinking about, super freak. I'm just thinking it's a cool tune.
So if I remember, you're based in New York. Are you originally from New York?
I'm originally from Massachusetts. I moved to New York out of college. I lived here longer than I actually had lived where I grew up at this point.
Well, we're recording on a Saturday. How was your week?
It's been a good week. No complaints here.
I saw you shared on your Instagram the Tiny Desk contest entry.
I'm sure most people are familiar, but just in case some of your listeners are not familiar, NPR does a Tiny Desk contest. I think it started about 10 years ago. I know most people are very familiar with the Tiny Desk concerts, but they also do a contest. So in 2017, I actually entered into the contest and we put in a song called Punani Politics that's on my I Am American album. Tank and the Bangers won, and I know a lot of people know and love Tank and the Bangers. And if you don't know Tank and the Bangers, get into them because she is an amazing person. The band is an amazing group. A friend of mine literally just hit me up and was like, hey, maybe y'all should enter again this year. So I was like, why not? Let's give it a try. We recorded the video and came out pretty good, if I do say so myself. The thing I love about it is the fact that like nobody has to vote. I don't really like things where like quote unquote America has to vote for you, because that is just a game of marketing, because there's so many great artists out here. A friend of mine was the first winner of Tiny Desk. His name is Xavier, but he goes by Fantastic Negrito. He's just done a lot of great things and, won a few Grammys, and it's been a good time for him. And I'm really proud of him. I'm really happy for him. He's an artist out of Oakland. I haven't seen any Tiny Desk winners not be great. Most of them go on and are able to evolve in their careers. And maybe that's because NPR, if you're a winner, they partner you with a mentor so that you can figure out how to take what has just happened here, meaning like, winning suddenly, having a national audience and being able to parlay that into, moving into the next levels of your career, which I appreciate.
Now, when will you know who has chosen?
Am I remembering correctly? I think in April, they let the winner know. And then in May, they let everybody know.
So if you win, or the person, well, whoever wins, I'm going to say you win. I'm putting out my energy race for you.
When I win, yes.
When you win, yes, manifest. So does that mean we will be able to see a performance?
The winner gets to perform at the Tiny Desk at the NPR offices where you see all the concerts happen. So you perform there, you are interviewed on their show, All Things Considered, and also they send you on a 10-city tour.
What I've seen of your live performances, I've listened to your recorded music, but your live performances, and I'm not just saying that, you're a very dynamic performer, and definitely wherever I'm at, if you're there, definitely I would go see you live.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So when was the last time that you performed live?
I recently performed at Lincoln Center Atrium for an event called the Burnt Sugar Smokehouse. And I'll tell you about Burnt Sugar, but I did a piece called The Tao of Abbey Lincoln. And that was myself and my friend LaFrey Ski. Do you want to go into Abbey Lincoln right now?
Of course, yes.
Okay. I'm working on a piece now called The Tao of Abbey Lincoln. So Tao meaning philosophy. If your listeners are not familiar with Abbey Lincoln, she was a jazz vocalist, or, I say so-called jazz vocalist because she didn't necessarily call herself a jazz vocalist, but she is, falls into that genre. She came into prominence in the 60s. She was an actress, singer, also songwriter, but she came into prominence as an actress and singer. The first film that she was in was a film called The Girl Can't Help It with Jane Mansfield, and she was just playing herself. She was singing a song called Spread the Word, Spread the Gospel. And so the thing that made her become an it girl, so to speak, in that moment was because in that film, they put her in a dress that Marilyn Monroe had wore in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. So they started to do this like sort of, try and turn her into sort of a, why am I forgetting this sister's name?
Like a Dorothy Dandridge?
Yes, like a Dorothy Dandridge. Thank you very much. Like a Dorothy Dandridge. They were trying to like mold her into that vein. But she rejected it. Like she really wasn't really feeling that. She did 2 more films. She did a film called For the Love of Ivy with Sidney Poitier. And she did a film called Nothing But a Man. But again, she wasn't really feeling all of this Hollywood stuff, because she had been also singing in jazz clubs on the West Coast. And a lot of people don't know, but there was like a jazz circuit. There was like an LA, sort of like Seattle, and then down to Hawaii. So there were a lot of jazz artists that were in Hawaii, in Honolulu. So there she had met like Billie Holiday. But Max Roach learned about her and saw her and was like, hey, come back to New York with us. We got this other thing going on. So her and Max and, Oscar Brown Jr., some other folks, they started making music together. And then eventually they made the seminal album, We Insist, the Freedom Now Suite. That was Max Roach, Oscar Brown Jr., and Abbey Lincoln, singing all the vocals on that record. That was really her foray into being more socially, politically conscious. In the 60s, things obviously were politically heating up. She was standing on business where that's concerned, found herself getting blackballed because she did an album called Straight Ahead. A downbeat writer decided that he didn't like what she was saying, and decided that he was going to do his level best to railroad her career. In the 90s, as what happens with so many of these artists, somebody from Europe finds you again and brings you back. So that was what happened with her. French producer, sort of helped to like bring her back into prominence. So in 2020, I was sitting on my couch and I was meditating and she came through. I called a friend of mine, LaFrey, who I was just saying performed with me at Lincoln Center, and was just like, hey, will you be the Max Roach to my Abbey Lincoln? And she was like, yeah, let's do something, because she's a drummer. But then she called me back. She said, hey, did you know Abbey was a poet? And I said, yes, I did. She said, well, she actually had a book of poetry that was unpublished. Maybe you should like find that or like, do something with that. But the operative word here is unpublished. So where am I going to find it? But it just so happened that in her obituary, I believe it was in her New York Times obituary, it lists the name of the book, and came to find out that the book is actually in her archive. They were able to share with me some of the work from that unpublished book. So that is my project. I'm taking some of the pieces from that book and then I'm creating new compositions. While Abbey was a jazz singer, that was her genre, I'm not doing a jazz project. I've been really dipping my toe into electronics using loopers and drum machines, things like that. That's new for me. Like, I'm very much an analog girl. I have a band. I know how to rock that band. But I've really been wanting to shift, bring Abbey into the future, create some new sounds around her words, introduce her to new people. And I feel like everything that I've pulled from her archive, for better or for worse, it's like things are still relevant. We're in this world that we're in, you know what I mean? So I think that everything is on time. Everything works as it should. I'm still working on that piece. Like, it's brand spanking new. I won a NYFA Women's Grant to work on this piece. So I will be recording this year at some point. I did that performance at Lincoln Center just in January.
I heard recently, through music, you are the voice of the ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel very connected to Abbey right now. There were definitely moments during this process where I thought, oh, I don't think I'm going to do this. And then something would happen. And then a photographer that I know, who I haven't seen in a really long time, out of the blue, quote unquote, sends me a picture of Abbey Lincoln that he took many years ago. And then he's like, oh, yeah, I just saw it and thought, I would send it to... What? And I'm like, okay, got it. I'm very thankful for her. I feel like she has and continues to like say yes to me. Because when I came to New York, Abbey was still alive. She definitely had a reputation for being very, straightforward. She'll let you know what's on her mind. She wasn't pulling any punches. So I'm very thankful that the spirit and the energy that has been walking with me has been very much like, you got this.
I love the word straightforward. And that's what I immediately thought of when I was listening to your music, because for me, it's healing. One of the songs in particular, I shared it with a friend in Sweden. I shared it with my sisters. I'm not a woman, but the song just really, it pierced beneath. And I was like, this is amazing. And it was the song Black Girls. Very easy title, because I love the way you spell things. But that song in particular was just like, whoa, this is so straightforward, needed, and just really captures what I know of my sisters and my mother. This is all the Black women in my life.
I'm glad that it came across that way, because that's what it is. Like, I wrote that song literally for my friends. Like, really just thinking about all the women in my life and how we work and how we roll. And it was just a love letter to us. So, yeah, thank you.
I want to ask, just based on what we've talked about, or what you've talked about so far, is what came first, the musician or the historian? Because there's so much history in your music.
Oh, that's interesting. I think I'm going to say the historian, only because of my grandmother. My grandmother was a historian. I spent lots of time with my grandmother. After school, I was with my grandmother. She was a historian. She was the keeper of the properties, as they might say, so she knew all the things about everything. We would sometimes be like, oh, Grammy, you got all these papers. But in her mind, she was holding on to the history. She was making sure that things didn't get lost and that we had a way to look back. I mean, I've been singing in a church choir since I was 5 years old, but because I come from such a politically active family, that history was injected into me from the start. That understanding of Blackness and being proud of it and being about standing up and talking about it, like that's just been something that was in me from the beginning. I don't know how to do one without the other. But I'm always interested, I'm like, oh, somebody just wrote a song about these red curtains in their living room and made it a hit, right? Okay, great, But to me, there's so much happening in the world. I don't really know how to just write a song about the red curtains and then not make it about something that we need to change. So I shout out my Grammy, but I think it all sort of came together.
I like understanding of Blackness because I definitely get that from your music. It's that thing of projects, either in film, television, music, what you're doing, and poetry, other people, where for me as a Black person, and particularly as a Black American, when I hear it, this is like soul food, I get this. I Am American is your most recent recorded album. That album I love, and I know I've listened to some other stuff. That's where I saw a lot of your live performances I found on YouTube. But one of the things that, again, connecting it to history, it was right away just seeing you as the front person and then the band, as I thought of, first and foremost, I thought of Sly and the Family Stone, the way that you fuse music together. How long has the band been in existence, blaKbüshe?
We started in 1999. Yeah, it was 1999. And at that time, I don't even think we were called blaKbüshe. I think at that time it was just Shelley Nicole. It wasn't until I started recording my first record, so maybe 2001 or 2002, somewhere in there, that I actually came up with the name. The name came through. We've had a couple of incarnations of the band, meaning band members. The person who's been with me the longest is my guitar player, Jerome Jordan. He's been with me from the very, very start. The second longest person that's been with me is my drummer, who's from Japan, Matsu. Even though I'm moving forward and doing this Abbey Lincoln project, I'm not ready to release my band. Especially here in New York, you're on this band scene and this circuit and you kind of feel like you've done all you could do here. And then it can become challenging in terms of well, how do I figure out, how to tour this band or, make money touring? Because that's a whole other animal. And so you can become discouraged and you can just become hey, I don't really know. I will say that's one of the reasons why, I decided to do Tiny Desk, because I was hey, I'm not really quite sure what to do with this band right now, but I don't want to just hang it up. I know that the music that we've made is important. I know that what's old to me will be new to somebody else because they haven't heard it. You're talking about Black Girls, right? Black Girls is a whole anthem. It's a whole anthem. I always say it doesn't have to be a Beyonce moment, but I wouldn't mind a Solange moment. You know what I mean? I'm just talking about level. You know what I'm saying?
No, I get that. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I saw the three of you when you were interviewed for Brooklyn Live several years ago, a few years ago.
Oh, BK Live, yeah.
Yeah, BK Live. Sorry about that. Yeah, you talked about the origin of the name. Can you just share with this particular audience the origin of the name?
Oh, yeah, sure, absolutely. And hopefully one day this will get me a sponsorship. So I'm at a bar. I'm at a bar with my first producer and literally, talking about the music, talking about the record, and trying to think of a band name. And I literally looked across the bar at all the bottles and I saw Bushmills whiskey and they had a Black label called blaKbüshe. And so I looked at my producer at the time, John, and I was like, hey, what do you think about blaKbüshe? He was like, well, you know what I think about blaKbüshe. I said, okay, time out. I'm like, we're talking about band names. Well, and then he just laughed. And then he was just like, that's pretty cool, actually. I just took that and then I rejudged the spelling because, that's what Black people do. And it became Shelley Nicole's blaKbüshe. The only bush you can trust besides your own.
Uh, what is that tagline? Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, that's how blaKbüshe came to be. And I always tell people though, like, if you don't know that story and you went someplace else with it, great. Whatever works for you.
When I referenced Sly and the Family Stone, it was because of the look of the band. And then also because I saw that you performed a Doobie Brothers song, thinking of them too, that there's this ethnically eclectic band.
Yeah, Doobies are one of my favorite bands, both incarnations, because a lot of people don't know. So there was the before Michael McDonald, and then there was the during Michael McDonald's era of the Doobie Brothers, you know. And the before Michael McDonald era is they're kind of more, you know, kind of classic rock kind of vibes, which I love. Like I love classic rock. That's definitely one of my, I love classic rock. And then when Michael McDonald came in, then they sort of like sold it up a little bit. You know, both incarnations I love so much. So yeah, we did Long Train Running. And of course, Long Train is from that more classic rock side of things. I never really think about racial makeup of my band. In the beginning, we were all black. And then when Matsu came into the band, he's Japanese. So that was, you know, the shift there. Now, Leon's in the band, you know, and Leon's Jewish. But I'm also part of a band called Burnt Sugar. And so Burnt Sugar, and I know we'll probably get to Greg Tate, but Burnt Sugar is like, everybody's in the band. You know, like you name it, you know, everybody's in that band. So it's just funny because I think in New York, I think it's a lot easier to suddenly find yourself in a band of different genders, different races, just because if you're here and you see somebody that's playing well and you're vibing them, then it's like, yeah, I need you to come do this thing with me. You know, because I think Sly was super intentional, you know what I mean? But I do appreciate the fact that, at least as we are right now, that the visual of it is one, and I think in a time when, you know, of being mixed and eclectic, because we really need that right now.
Yeah, and then too with your style and your stage presence and the types of, well, I'm calling it fusion. I don't know if that's correct. With all of that, how do you as a creative force stay focused in that way when it seems like the music industry, definitely for Black performers, tries to pigeonhole and say, oh, because I know I've read about Lenny Kravitz and, oh, well, with your look, air quotes, you should be gearing towards this type of music. How do you stay focused in that way?
Well, I'm probably lucky that I've never ever really been deep in the music industry. Like, I've never had anybody like come to a show and be like, we're going to make you a star. Like, no, that's never happened. So I've never really had to conform to the industry. And then I've also been surrounded by other people who were also not conforming to the industry. Well, I'm looking at, you know, Black folks doing rock and roll, and they're like, yeah, we're doing it. There's nobody there to be like, no, you can't. You know what I'm saying? I think that it makes it that much easier. And then I think also at this point in my life, I can't really imagine, like, if something were to happen and somebody's like, oh yeah, we're going to put you on whatever platform, blah, 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 blah. Like, at this point, it's like, I am who I am. So, but I'm not at an age where, you know, shiny things are going to make me, you know, bend to somebody's will. So it just makes it, I think, easier to just go with whatever is coming out of your spirit in terms of making music and what's coming up. Yeah, I've always been out of the box. Like, I've always been the type of artist that was kind of in the middle, you know, in terms of thinking about the New York music scene that I came up in, because I definitely came up in a time where there was like a big indie soul movement. And while some of my songs are definitely, you know, they're funk, they're rock, they're soul, but I was definitely a little too rock and roll for some of these indie soul folks, even though they love me and I love them too. But it was like, people were like, I don't know, quite know what to do. Also, or as well, you know, if you're doing this rock and roll stuff, the folks that sort of are the gatekeepers of that, they don't really know what to do with you either. And I've definitely seen many of my friends who are definitely a little more rock and roll than me have to navigate that gauntlet of people being like, well, I don't know. Or navigate a gauntlet of like, yeah, we're going to give you a record deal. And then they give you a deal and then you get dropped. You know, all the things that can happen. A long time ago, somebody said to me, you know, just keep doing what you're doing. And, you know, eventually people will catch up. I'm just like, okay. But I do it for me. Of course, as an artist, you want as many people to receive and feel what you're doing as possible. But I don't really know how to do anything except for what I do. And what I mean by that is like, you know, whatever the spirit is telling me, whatever I'm writing, whatever. Yeah, it's just kind of what it is.
Okay. You kind of touched on people that you were able to connect with early on. And I know, again, in that Big K Live interview in 2017, you talked about Greg Tate and then Vernon Reid, both co-founders of the Black Rock Coalition. How did connecting with them or with that group help you with your career?
I met Greg first before I was even doing any music in New York. I was a journalist. Greg was like one of my first paying writing gigs I ever got was to interview Greg about the Black Rock Coalition. Through the years, Greg just became a friend. You know, he's one of those kind of people who, if he brought you in, he'd carry you through. And what I mean by that, he just became a friend. Like, he just became somebody who was like, hey, Shell, you know, come do this. Or, hey, Shell, we're going to do that. Over time, I mean, real talk, like, you know, I had started my band. I was doing, you know, I was on the spoken word poetry scene here in New York, you know. So he knew, like, the things that I was doing. I was also part of the Black Rock Coalition orchestra. So the BRC orchestra would sometimes just do, you know, tribute shows to certain Black Rock artists. So I was part of that too. So there was a year, excuse me, that we did what was supposed to be a fundraiser for Gary Scheider, who was part of the Parliament Funkadelic, because he was ill at the time. But by the time we got to the show, sadly, he had passed away. So we, you know, it was for his family at that point. But that's when Greg, I guess, seeing me playing tambourine on that show, decided to ask me if I would be part of a Burnt Sugar show that he was doing. So Burnt Sugar was a band that him and Jared Michael Nickerson formed. That's how I came to start to do music with Greg. Greg bringing me into Burnt Sugar was definitely a big thing because I would have never thought I would be in Burnt Sugar. I didn't even see that coming. And with Burnt Sugar, you know, been able to travel and perform, you know, all over the globe. It's so funny, like, I wouldn't necessarily, like, credit Greg with, like, boosting my career, but I would credit Greg, you know, with, like, changing how I think about music and performance, just because Burnt Sugar is an improvised band at times. We're a conducted band. So we're creating music out of nothing oftentimes, even though Greg wrote a lot of songs, but then we would do conduction inside of those songs. He really taught me something about improvisation that I really wasn't thinking about before. Burnt Sugar was coming out of the lineage of Butch Morris, and a lot of people in Burnt Sugar actually studied with Butch Morris as well. So it's a whole thing. So I just think that Greg, you know, besides just being always super supportive of me and anything that I was doing and always had good word for me, and he taught me about how to believe in myself even more. Like, he just believed in me so much. And I'm not alone. Like, I could line up like 10 people beside me who would say the same thing. How do you spread your heart and your love and your energy like that in such a way that so many people across the globe feel so close to you? But he poured into people, you know, besides his genius writing. You know, I had met Vernon early. I can't remember exactly when I met Vernon, but I really got to know Vernon when Vernon came in to be part of Burnt Sugar. We did a reimagining of David Bowie's work, and I believe that was the first show, at least that Vernon and I were on together. And when Burnt Sugar went to Paris to do a reimagining of Steely Dan music, which Vernon was conducting, at the end of that show, and I was sick. That's a whole other thing, but I was so sick. But I got through the show. I'm in Paris. We're doing the thing. He just came up beside me and he said, the next person to conduct this band is going to be you. And just kept walking. And I was like, you know? But it was also that moment. Vernon is somebody that, like, sees you. I see you doing da-da-da-da-da, and he'll just lay it out. and also pour in. So when I was thinking about making this I Am American album, and then I was like, you know what? I'm just going to ask Vernon. And I had literally prepared, and I'm, exaggerating, but like a scroll of reasons why he should do this. Cause he's Vernon, right? Like, and I'm just like, yeah, I'm rolling up on this guy. He's like a Grammy Award winning, blah, 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 blah. Granted, I know him, but still, like, you're thinking about people's resumes. So I just was like, hey, I'm making this album. I'd really like to know if you produce it. And then he just said, yes, I'll produce it. And here's why. Yeah. And I'm so thankful for that. That album sounds really great. Shout out to Alan Camlett, who recorded and mixed that record. Shout out to everybody who's on that record, actually. That was like a real labor of love. And I'll harken back to what a story Greg used to tell us about when he was at Howard University. And when he was at Howard, he said Sonia Sanchez came to speak. She's talking about New York. She's talking about, poetry scene. She's talking about, all the people, blah, blah, blah. So when it's all done, he says to her, it's all great, these things you're telling us, all these people but like, how do we get to know all these people? Like, we're just here, we're students, how do we do this? Right, exactly.
Okay.
And then she just said to him, if you're doing what you're supposed to do, they will all become your friends.
Oh, wow.
And that's exactly what happened. I mean, for him, it's exactly what happened. And I have to say, I feel like it's exactly what happened for me. Sometimes I look up and I'm just like, how do I know these people? Like, how do I have this person's number in my phone? And that's not a name drop. It's just oh, yeah. Like, if you're doing what you're supposed to do, the universe will conspire to assist you.
To me, I hear an example of these people, these individuals and others saw that you belong in this arena. Period.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was your second album, I believe, right? I Am American.
Third. I say three.
Third. Okay, yeah. Okay, third. Yeah. Apologies for that. Yeah, I definitely recommend that album. I've been sharing it with people. I love it myself. Of course, discovering it through Brad Walron. And when I talked to him and I listened to the song that he's on, Fallopian Part 1, and I was like, oh, this is intriguing that a man's voice is on a song that's named Fallopia.
Well, Brad wrote that. So,
he wrote it. Okay.
Oh, yeah, Brad wrote that. Okay. Yeah, Brad wrote that 100%. Brad and I go way back. So we go back to like 94 or something like that when we first met. Before either of us were doing a whole lot of poetry, but we landed at this event called the Tea Party. I always say before the Tea Party became a bad name. But we we landed at this event called the Tea Party that was hosted by this brother, Ian Friday, who another person you should look up. He's an awesome producer of, dance music. Yeah, Ian Friday, just look him up. But anyway, we landed at the Tea Party, which was at Frank's Lounge in Brooklyn at the time. So, Brad is my brother. Yeah, we've been in the trenches together for a very, very, very long time. So I'm super proud of him, like super proud of all the things that he's doing and what has transpired, the books, the music, all the things. It's as it should be. It's as it should be, and a long time coming. Yeah, Brad wrote that piece. Yeah. And then we got Vernon Reid to do a little blues, and yeah.
For the public, this name Vernon Reid that has been mentioned several times is behind the band Living Colour. And I remember him in college, and I'm not a musician, but just as a Black person who was afraid sometimes to acknowledge publicly music outside of what was expected of me to listen to. When I heard his music in that band, I was like, okay, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, man. And Living Colour's still rocking. Like, they still out here doing it big. You know what I mean? So I need these Rock and Roll Hall of Fame people to get on it and get these people in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But, Living Colour is still out here making new music, doing great performances. Corey Glover, to me, the greatest male rock vocalist of all time.
You've talked about Burnt Sugar and that it's an improvisational band. But what is your role? Because I know you sing, but I also know you're a musician. What all do you do with Burnt Sugar?
With Burnt Sugar, I'm a vocalist. I'm also like, I do hand percussion. So, a lot of shakers and tambourines, because when Greg was alive, he wrote all the songs. It's crazy to say this, but they have like 21, 22 records. The new Burnt Sugar album is called If You Can't Dazzle Them With Your Brilliance, Then Baffle Them With Your Blisluth. I'm going to spell that for you. Blisluth. Part 2. I know that's a Greg Tate made up word. I know it is.
Okay, I was just saying I have a new word to learn that I know.
So I've been with this band, like I said, for a really long time, 15 years or so, but this is the first Burnt Sugar project that I'm actually featured on as a vocalist. It's 2 live recordings, one from when we were at the Concert of Colors in Detroit. We have a sister friend who lets us stay on her farm when we're sometimes touring through the Midwest. And out there, she had a beautiful barn and all this recording equipment. And I just said to V. Jeffrey Smith, who's one of our horn players in the band and guitar players, I was like, hey, it'd be great to do a little recording in the barn. Like, I've always wanted to record in the barn. And next thing I know, he pulled all the equipment into the barn. And we recorded in the barn. So that album is part barn recording, part Concert of Colors. Yeah, so that is out in the world. Now we're in a state of, reimagining, since Greg is not with us. That's the thing, that's the beautiful thing about Burnt Sugar, is that he taught so many of us how to conduct, myself included. And so it's not like we can't carry on. Like, we definitely can. Like, we have the formula, we have the magic. It's just a matter of, forward movement in terms of, are we going to write new songs? Are we going to just continue to celebrate, the music that Greg wrote? Because he wrote so much of it.
With touring both for Burnt Sugar and for Shelley Nicole's blaKbüshe, where has that taken you regionally, nationally, internationally?
So with blaKbüshe, the farthest we've traveled is London, going that way. And then, I've also played in Los Angeles. Most of our shows, I'll say, for blaKbüshe have been Eastern Seaboard, like as far south as Atlanta and as far north as Boston. And then West Coast. It's kind of like not a whole lot in between. But Burnt Sugar, we've done a lot of Midwest because Jared, who's our bass player and also our business person, he's from Ohio, from Dayton, obviously very rich funk history in Dayton. So we did a lot of Midwest, probably as far as Minneapolis. We played out there, and then jumping over, to the West Coast. Definitely have done San Diego all the way up to Seattle. And then also, East Coast as well for Burnt Sugar. Burnt Sugar's also gone to Paris, and before I was in Burnt Sugar, I know they had been to Portugal, and I know I'm forgetting some places because I've not been in Burnt Sugar for the whole, time that band has been around. I feel like the middle of the country always gets jumped over. It's like you get as far as like Ohio or Illinois, Chicago, maybe Michigan, maybe Detroit, and then you start jumping over.
That's a great visual. Like, oh, no, we're not going there.
Yes. So, yeah. Oh, yeah, I played in Detroit. I forgot about that. I played with, I don't know if you're familiar with Jessica Caremore. Of course you are, because I'm sure Brad talked about Jessica. Yeah, she does an event called Black Women Rock. So I played Black Women Rock a couple of times, and that's in Detroit.
You mentioned your career as a journalist. When did you decide to pivot or change and say, I'm going to pursue being a singer and musician as a career?
At least for me, like everything was happening simultaneously because you got to eat. So it's kind of like, yeah. So the whole time that I was working in journalism, I was definitely still doing my art. So in the beginning, I was part of the spoken word poetry scene here in New York. And I was part of a collective called Black Lotus. And everybody had a job. Everybody went to work. Everybody did our poetry thing, at night on the weekends. That's how we did our thing. When the band first started, I still was working. I mean, the first time I went to London with my band, at that time I was working at a magazine, was working freelance. So how I would work would be like 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off. So on my 2 weeks off, I was like, oh, let's go to London. You know what I mean? So it was that kind of thing. Like some people are very much like, I'm jumping off I'm jumping off the diving board and I'm just going to put everything into making this music. As you know, become more, people know your name or whatever, I think it just becomes easier to like say, okay, I'm going to work, but I'm not going to work as much. I still have friends who are still doing it. I still have people, like full time. Like, for instance, when the pandemic happened and all of us lost work, meaning all the artists, right? Everybody, we were the first ones. But I had friends who were still in the journalism world who, praise God, called me up and were like, hey, you're out of work, aren't you? I'm like, yeah. They were like, you need work. I was like, yup. And so people were like, here, I got you. So I'm very thankful for my, journalistic life, where it has taken me. And, the pandemic was weird, but it kind of freed me up in a way, because there was a time in journalism where they used to always be like, oh yeah, well, you can't work from home. Like, you have to like see the pages. But then it's like, oh, no. Like, everybody's working from home. So it just totally freed me up, because when that friend of mine gave me that work and then I was able to work from home, like I was on tour with the Parable of the Sower opera. I was like, I still need this little change on the side, but I was able to like do this tour and do this little gig on the side, because now I can take my laptop anywhere in the world and I don't have to be chained to a desk. You know what I mean? So it's been a blessing, my little journalism degree and my little journalism career here in New York. It's to say, like, when did you switch? It's like, while I definitely do music more than I do the other, but it's like, it's still there.
Wow. Oh gosh. Again, wherever I can be, wherever I'm at, if you're there, I'm going to go see you for sure.
I'm really hoping that blaKbüshe, we get to start performing a little more again.
Which is more enriching to the soul, performing live or recording?
For me, performing live. I'm a theater kid, so I'm all about like being with the people and the audience and the feedback. Yeah, live performance any day of the week.
Well, thank you so much for this. Truly. I always like to end with asking if you have any final thoughts or insights.
I just want to ask your people, or to tell everybody, to go to my YouTube channel and check out the Tiny Desk video and just like and subscribe to my channel. Even though it's not like a voting situation, I just feel like the more eyes on it, the better. That's just what something is telling me. Just look out for the Tao of Abbey Lincoln. There will be some more performances coming with that.
You mentioned your YouTube channel. Where else can we connect with you?
You can find me on Instagram. I'm at blaKbüshe, BLAKBUSHE. And I'm also at official Shelley Nicole on Instagram, because why? It's a long story.
Well, I like the official Shelley Nicole, because when I was looking at Shelley Nicole, I found someone else. I was like, that's not her. Thank you for spending time with us. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, comment, and subscribe. Share with your friends too. You can also follow us on Instagram at Our Black Gay Diaspora and on Twitter at blaKbüshe. Until next time.